start talking to you about today's presenter. Dr. Don Storer has been teaching chemistry at Southern State Community College in Southern Ohio for over 20 years. Before that, he taught high school chemistry and was chief chemist of an analytic library. He completed his PhD in chemistry at Miami University of Ohio in the field of chemical education. His professional interests include chemistry and archaeology, teaching in the context of a final project, and, of course, the use of technology in teaching. So, Don, I'm going to let you show them what you're working on, and I'm going to turn the desktop over to you. So take it away. So, Don, there you go. I am not hearing you, Don. I was hearing you before we got started. Don, I'm not hearing you. You may have done a mute on your headset or something.
Steve, this is Larry Miller. Are you able to hear me?
I'm hearing you. Can you hear Don?
I cannot.
Okay, Don, we have a problem with your audio. Well, we were hearing him loud and clear moments ago before we officially got this started.
I can verify that.
And I'm not sure. I don't think the problem is what's on your desktop. But he is. We can see your desktop there, Don. We just can't hear your voice. So I don't think it's what's on your desktop that is causing the problem. You may want to plug and unplug. You know, I'm not. Can you use the chat room to? I'm hearing some background.
Can you hear me now?
Hey,
yes,
there we go.
I can.
Okay.
I'm not just going to ask what went wrong. I'm just glad you're back.
Okay. Yeah, your volume is down, but I can hear you, and you can still hear me?
I can hear you loud and clear.
Okay. Let me put my PowerPoint. Now, can you see my PowerPoint okay?
Everything is good to go.
Okay. Sorry, but I don't know what happened. Well, anyway, welcome. I'm very excited about this. Hopefully my PowerPoint will advance. There we go. Southern State is in rural Ohio in Southwest. We're an unusual community college in that we have 4 campuses, and those are the pictures you're seeing here on the screen. Enrollment of about 3,000, and 4 of our 5 counties in our service area are Appalachian. And so we have a real problem with, in some cases, with internet access for our students. What I wanted to do was to try to give you a really brief background as to how this all got started and led me to doing a flipped class and using SoftChalk to do that. What we had was this dual credit program in chemistry where in Ohio a student can take a college level class at their high school, and normally that is taught by the high school teacher and they can get college credit. We started by awarding introductory level chemistry credit for these dual credit courses, and we had good participation, but we were working under a grant, and they said, this is fine, but we really would like for you to offer the college level. And the problem that I ran into was that none of the high school teachers that I was working with had the qualifications to teach a college level course. So I'm saying, how could I make this happen? A lot of wonderful teachers I was working with. So I decided to use a blended delivery team teaching approach. Use my own tests. It turned out most of the labs occurred at the college. And so use an asynchronous delivery of this online portion. So it's sort of like I was the professor and the high school teacher was taking on the role of the TA in a traditional university setting. And so I had never done online classes, so I learned about the program Camtasia. There's a number of ways that you can do this. screen capture programs to capture lectures. And one of the things, if you have not done this, the first thing I thought of is I'll hang a microphone around my neck and I'll just do my traditional classes. Let me tell you, that does not work well. That's not a good choice, even though I did it. So one of the things I hope to accomplish with this webinar is that you don't make all the same mistakes that I did. And so I figured in teaching chemistry, and I'm not assuming that obviously that everyone's in chemistry, but if you think about it, there are certain subjects where you can present a lot of the material, for example, in a PowerPoint presentation. But math courses or chemistry where you have to work problems, you need to sometimes write on the board. So I had a tablet PC. I could write on the PC, and that would capture my writing and my explanation. So the high school teacher worked with the students. It was a wonderful group of students, and at the end of the year, I said, now I want you to be honest with me. Tell me your thoughts on these video lectures. And they said, well, really, Dr. Storer, they were pretty boring. so which really, I really wanted them to be honest, but so I said, okay, I really need to do something to improve this. And so this is when I learned about using SoftChalk and creating interactive lessons. I learned that the problem was that I had 25, 30-minute online lectures, and I have since then learned that that doesn't work well. Once you put it online, it just doesn't work in the same way. And so I needed an easy way to make it interactive, and I was at a technology conference and met some representatives of SoftChalk. And I'm honestly, this is a wonder. Not because they told me to say this. It is a wonderful program. It really allows you to make a course interactive without all the problems of learning HTML programming or something like that. Now, Larry, would you like for me, did you want to survey them before I show the lesson, or?
Well, it's Steve, and why don't
Steve,
you?
I'm sorry.
Yeah, why don't you launch the lesson, and while you're doing that, I'm going to launch our last poll about sort of what you are doing, whether if you're an educator teaching, and most of you are, you know, what's your experience in the flipped classroom, or actually, how many of you actually are chemistry educators? So about a third of you have responded, so Don is getting his content up so you can see what's going on. And okay, over 80% of you have responded, so I'm going to close the poll and share it. So you can see that 51% of you are in a not flipped classroom, 12% are teaching in a flipped classroom, and 42% teaching full, some of you teaching fully online. So there's multiple answers here. And a quarter of you are chemistry instructors. Excellent.
Wow. Okay.
So that's a much bigger number than I expected, Don. So
That's
let me
great.
hide the poll and send it back to you.
Okay. I have the lesson up now. Can you see that?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we got the lesson there? Okay, the wonderful part about this is all the banner that says Introduction to Chemistry, Unit 1. SoftChalk, you just type it in like a word processor. It creates all that for you. Then based upon what type of heading you use, it will create this table of contents. And that was one of the things I really like about this, that it makes creating this table of contents and navigation very, very simple. So my general format that I follow, and you could use this in any discipline, is I like to have very few words, do a lot of short videos, and that's what we have here, followed by a quiz. And I use Quiz Me, which is a question. Now, I'm going to drop down here to the section on density. And the nice thing I like here is I can hover over this. Is that showing up, Steve? Are you there?
I muted myself. So
oh,
yes,
okay.
It does.
Okay.
Yes, it is.
Okay, so I just want to double check. So you can have your objectives there. Those can pop up, and then you won't be able to hear the sound, fortunately. But I have a little video clip that talks about a density problem. But I'll go on down here to the one that I find that students have a lot of issues with, is density by water displacement. And as the problem comes up here on the video, you'll see in just a second here, I find that beginning students, you've heard this about word problems, and so they'll read this problem and say, I don't know where to start. I just don't know what to do with this. And so I call this an embedded video problem, and I'm going to fast forward through it. So right now I would be talking about the problem and what it says and all that. But then what I really like is I can put in a little video clip that duplicates what is occurring in that problem is about, so they can see what that problem is saying. And there's so many ways that you could do this in so many subjects. You can, if you're talking about a history course, you could have a little video clip about a historical site. There's so many ways you can incorporate these videos into this. So what you're seeing is a video that is duplicating what that problem says. And then after they watch that, then I can go start working the problem, and they can see my explanation of the problem. And I won't go through all of that. But then when I finish explaining it, then what's really nice, now I can pop up a quiz question for them and say, here's another problem similar. Can you work this one? And then they can check their answer. I'll just pick one at random, and I happen to pick the right one. So you can see here it says right, good job, and over here in the lower left-hand corner it will keep score for you. Now I choose not to count that as part of their grade, and so they have an unlimited number of tries, but you can set this up so that it will keep the grades if you wish to do that. So the navigation is very, very simple. You can incorporate this and make a very visually rich environment. And so these are pictures that I'll show a little bit of this. These are some this video. You can zoom in and see the balance here, the weighing. It'll come up here in just a second. Fast forward. And so to me, that is a really valuable tool of this whole thing here. And so anyway, that kind of gives you an overview of this. And now, Steve, I have to get back to my PowerPoint. I apologize. And so the big thing here, regardless of what the content is the general design of the class of my class is it is a hybrid course. It's flipped. And because of the problems with some of my students getting high-speed internet, I chose to actually distribute the lessons via flash drives, which is a wonderful way because it comes up in their browser, but they don't have to have internet. So if internet is down or they're having problems with it, that takes that totally out of the equation. But they can also bring it up on, I put it in Blackboard, they can bring it up that way. So I give them multiple ways of accessing the lesson. One of the things that if you want to design this, it's very important to figure out a design, and I chose to do it by unit. So every unit that I cover has an exam over that unit. And you need to encourage them to do the lesson. So I have a take-home quiz. At this point it's paper and pencil, and so that has a deadline, and the idea is that they have, it sort of encourages them to actually do the lesson. And then another nice feature of this is that the PowerPoint notes have QR codes. So here's a QR code of one of my lessons, and they can access with their smartphone. So they can bring up any of those videos like I was just showing you on their smartphone. And what I chose to do is I'll give them PowerPoint handouts, and I put in the margin these PowerPoint codes, or QR codes, I'm sorry, and they can bring up those video lessons, not the entire SoftChalk, but just the video portion on their smartphone. So the general design, the way I'm running it right now, and I started this in the fall, is our face-to-face time. We answer questions. There will be problem sets, because this is chemistry. We will have what I call mini labs, maybe a 20 or 30-minute hands-on activity that addresses the topic that we're covering. And of course, we have the traditional experiments. The other nice thing about this is I can use the clickers to assess where they are at that point in the lesson and determine where they're having some difficulties. And if you've taught for a long time, you can almost predict where they're going to have some problems. And sometimes I choose to go ahead and lecture about it because I know that from experience that a lot of these students will have some issues with that. So what I'm doing is I'm using the clickers, and I correspond a clicker question to a topic or concept covered to a corresponding exam question. And so then what I can get is a printout here that we create that shows each one of these bars. That we've obviously erased the student's name, so I could have a bar corresponding to each student if I want to show the percent improvement from the time that we used the clicker questions until they actually took an exam over it. And so to me, this is a very valuable tool that works well with this whole concept. A few other factors to consider is I think if you were a first-year teacher, this would be extremely difficult to create the lecture portion, because if you haven't taught it, it's going to be difficult to know the areas where they're going to have difficulties. Those of you out there who are chemistry teachers know that the mole concept is a lot of times difficult for them to really grasp, and so that's one I hit hard in the face-to-face. So a little bit of experience in teaching the course before is very helpful in creating the online portion. If you're familiar with Quality Matters, that is an organization that deals with best practice and certification of online and blended courses. And so I just chose a few of their principles. One of the things is your online portion should be easy to navigate. SoftChalk does that. It creates the whole navigation for you. That makes that easy. As you saw there, the learning objectives should be clearly stated. You can just type those in a pop-up window, and there they are. That you've got a self-check by using and I'm only using a portion of it. There's a lot of other you can use. If you were teaching, for example, biology, you can have there's a labeling questioning that you can use, and then appropriate assessment strategies. So all of these things in Quality Matters, you really should look at that if you're just getting started in this. Another thing that is keeping the videos short, I have a former student that's helping with a lot of the technical parts of this, and he was saying, whatever possessed you to think that a 22-minute video was a good idea? So I've had him helping me chop up my previous recordings into short 3 to 6 minute sessions. And so, again, you need some type of a system to encourage students to complete the lesson. My questions in these quizzes are, you don't have to understand the concept, you just have to watch it. That tells me, yes, I at least made an attempt to go through the lesson. And of course problem sets if you're teaching something like chemistry or math or something like that. The thing that's coming up next for me personally, I would like to have when the students meet face-to-face, and I think this is very difficult, at least for me in chemistry, is to have, if we're learning a new subject, is that we have a collaboration of a group of students. We all know that the theories of learning will say if they work together and discuss something that they will retain it better. I'd like to have something that makes them struggle to answer the question, and they have to work together to collaborate to solve that problem. That's one of the things that I hope to work on and come up with in the future. The other thing that we're working on right now for the rest of the faculty is to incorporate this assessment so it creates a final report very simply that correlates that clicker data with the exam that they take over, so that we can show value added and use some targeted instruction as a result of that. The other thing that Steve and I were talking about, we want to make sure you emphasize that all of this will work with any discipline. And again, not because SoftChalk told me to say so, but their logo says if it's not easy, it's not SoftChalk, or something to that effect. It truly is if you can use Word or a Word document, a word processing program. It's literally that simple. It's very, very straightforward. And the other thing that I'll address that Steve mentioned is if you're wanting to learn it, they have some great instructional videos that are nice and short that'll tie you right in on how to. So I just watched the instructional videos that came with it, and I was up and running in no time in creating those lessons. So Steve, I'll turn it back over to you. Here's my contact information. If you want to email me, I'll be happy to respond to any questions.
Okay, well, let me comment that we have a lot of questions, so don't anybody go away. There's some great questions here. And at the end, we are recording this session, so you will get an email tomorrow with a link to the archive and a copy of the PowerPoint slides that Don showed you today, as well as contact information for any of us, for folks at NIFOD, folks at SoftChalk, for Dr. Storer himself. So let me get started with the questions. A couple of people came in and basically came into the session with not being really clear about what differentiates the flipped classroom from your standard classroom and how that relates to an online class, etc. So you may want to do some sort of basic description of the flipped classroom and as the first question you may want to address.
Okay. I taught high school for 10 years, and I've been at the college for over 20, so I've taught a long time. And I know all of you out there that are teachers, that one of your biggest frustrations is that little bit of chattering that's going on maybe somewhere in the classroom where they're not paying attention. And usually what is the cause of that, is that if they already understand what you're going over, you're going to lose their attention. And so a flipped classroom the name means that what you would typically do in your classroom is flipped. That's what occurs at home, and they actually do their homework at school. And so if you think about it for a minute, that makes so much sense. They are getting the instruction, the typical kind of explanation that you would give face-to-face at home. And so then when they're trying to do their homework and they get frustrated and can't answer the question or figure it out, you're right there if you flip it and meet with them face-to-face. Is that, you think that addresses it, Steve?
Yeah, Don, this is Larry Miller with NISOD, and if I could, I think you did a very good job of explaining the basic concept. One of the things that we've learned from online learning is that people like to have the ability to control when they access material. And even what format they're going to access this in. So by using these videos, it really gives the learner the opportunity to say, well, I'm going to do this after dinner, or I'm going to do this after I finish this other homework, and it really gives them the opportunity to really focus on that. So that's one of the key elements of it. And then what you're bringing into your classroom experience is really the part that we call engaged learning. It's doing much more group work, hands-on work, lab work, that type of thing. So I think this concept is great. I think you did a very good job with this presentation.
Well, thank you. And I want to bring out some other thing. For those of you who are teaching college, in my community college, I will have a teenager that's in my class alongside maybe someone who is 40-some years old that's been out of school for a long time. Those two people learn at very different rates. And I don't want to leave anyone behind. So this is wonderful in the fact that I can address the needs of both of those types of students. Steve?
Okay, I'm getting over a cold, so I'm coughing a lot, so I turn my headset off. Okay, there's a follow-up question having to do with a blended model, number of days you teach face-to-face, number of days that, and what kind of mix that is. Are you actually meeting during all the course time, or just part of that? Has that changed the way you looked at how much face-to-face time you have with students?
That's a great question. I started it this fall with my class, and I was nervous about losing the face-to-face time till I was sure. I didn't want a student to have an inadequate experience in chemistry simply because I was experimenting with something new. So we shortened the class time a little bit. At our community college, because the students are driving, I have a student that's driving nearly an hour to come to my class. So I do want to shorten the number of days if I can because of simply the driving time. I think this next fall I will probably attempt teaching introductory chemistry, meeting only 1 day a week. I'll actually, right now we meet 2 days a week, maybe 20 to 30 minutes less than normal for a regular class. So I'm not shortening it that much. I think that I feel confident that I can accomplish what I need to next fall, only having those students having to come 1 day a week. So we'll work in, we'll have enough time to do the labs and answer their questions and some explanation. That
Okay,
answer the question?
Great, yes, because during our previous discussion earlier this week, I realized that you were changing this model based upon what this different model in the flipped classroom would enable. But there are two questions, one from Holly and one from Bill, that basically say the same thing. How do you get the students to actually do their homework? Because one, Holly says it was a disaster when she tried it a few years ago because the kids would show up without being prepared. So how do you manage that?
Well, one of the things, and if you're teaching chemistry, one of the things that students, at least in chemistry, know that they're going to have a hard time getting it on their own. Now, there's a lot of ways that different people do this. Some people they use an electronic quiz, and if you're teaching in a college, you could say, this is you hand me the quiz or you can't come in the door. If you're not prepared, you go down to the computer lab and put on your headset and do the lesson. I'm not that hardcore. I say, okay, here's the quiz. You got to hand it in on time. And so there's a little bit of problem in the beginning, but I find that the majority of them, some way or another, they will finally realize, oh, this is good stuff. This is really helpful. I can do this. I can stop him. I can back up. I can repeat it. And so once they catch on, at least my experience has been that it's working well. Now, if you are doing what I did in the beginning and you are creating a 30 to 40-minute online lecture without it being interactive, that may be part of the problem. And I learned that the hard way.
Yeah, this is Larry again, and I would definitely echo that, Don. Again, what we've learned, we've been doing distance learning for quite a while now, and distance learning by video, for example, was fairly ubiquitous in the 70s and 80s and so forth, and it's the ability to repeat view, to watch it again. I know years ago they said you could never teach developmental math in a distance learning fashion. Well, I think that's been proven that you can do that, but it's all about engagement and making those, you have to approach it sort of like Sesame Street. There's nothing on Sesame Street that lasts more than about 4 or 5 minutes.
Right.
And really that's kind of a good strategy, particularly with complex issues like chemistry, where part of it you're really talking about math and part of it you're really talking about physics and some other things like that. So the more you can kind of slice and dice the material and make it accessible in small bites, I think that's a good strategy.
Let me add one other thing. You brought out something else, Larry. My goal, because this is truly high school level, I wanted to package this entire course. I work with high school teachers all over Southern Ohio. I wanted to give them all of my lessons and then say, look, let me show you how to edit this, and you can make it your own. Put your voice with it. Change it the way you teach. What I run into, and this is what my point, Larry, is the fact that I want to make it visually rich. I wanted in my lessons, so I'm putting lots of pictures. I'm putting YouTube clips, and so you start running into copyright issues. So I couldn't put that out there. So the point is what you'll see on the archive, I had to cut out a lot of my videos because I'm only allowed to use those in my own classroom. I'm using animations and simulations and things that come with the textbook, which I'm allowed to use in my own class, but I can't put it out there for the whole world to use. So that's another thing. I think this allows you to be visually rich. Okay.
Yes, well, some of the questions that are coming up is about all the videos, and I think you've answered that just now, but I just want to be sure. Do you create some of the, I mean, where do all the videos from? Are some of them personally created with Camtasia, and what is the mix?
I create all of them, which was a huge, and I will say, it's a huge amount of work, but if you do it right, chemistry doesn't change that much at this level, at least. And so, and it's by having it bite-sized, it's easy to redo one of them. So I did a lot of talking to myself at home. I just set it up on my computer at home and recorded those at home. Yeah.
Go ahead. No, go. There's a question about captioning the videos too.
Right. What I would do is I would, it was based, the skeleton, if you will, is PowerPoint. And so that's my outline of what I'm covering. And so I will have pictures and diagrams, very few words per slide. And then embedded one, maybe in the PowerPoint, are these video clips maybe that came, animations or simulations that come with instructors' resources with the text. Or maybe I found someone did a really cool, I found one of these guys in Australia did this neat thing about pressure and gas walls and stuff. It's a YouTube video, and I incorporated that in there and pulled that in. But I capture the whole screen capture using Camtasia, and then I bring those video clips, as you saw, into the SoftChalk. And that's the great part about this, is it makes it then interactive. And the student said, those questions really helped me because I'll watch your little lesson there, and by answering those questions, I know what it is you really wanted me to get out of it.
That's an excellent point, Don. I think it's sort of the call to action.
Right.
And just watching the videos unto themselves. There's a certain percentage, I always say about a third of the people can learn. It doesn't really matter how we present it. But in a lot of cases, they need more assistance. And having that call to action of just answering a question, one question, even, right, kind of, forces them to be active. I think that's a good strategy.
There's a couple of comments here. Natalie's commented that it's easier to get the students involved in a flipped class if you give a quiz at the beginning of the class based on what they were supposed to do on their own before the class. So, sometimes there's this embarrassment factor, I guess she's suggesting, that will make them realize that they had something they needed to do. And anyway, there was an interesting comment. And Don asks if there's a need for public domain animations and videos. He's given a thought to pursuing a grant that would allow animation students to create content and like this for the public domain, basically adding to the open educational resource model and making this kind of content generally available. So just sort of throw that out if you have a comment about that.
This is Larry. I could quickly comment. One of the things that I encourage educators to look for is the Creative Commons licensing. Mm-hmm. For example, I'm a big user of Flickr. Flickr does have some video, but it has lots of images. If you do advanced search on Flickr and go down to the bottom and say, I only want to look at stuff that the people that put it up there are granting Creative Commons licensing for this educational fair use practice, then what you are using there meets the test of being in the public domain.
Yeah. Let me add. Okay, go ahead, Don.
Well, I worked with the Blended Schools people, the blendedschools.net, and I know they use SoftChalk, and but they showed me. I couldn't find, Larry, there's a lot of good stuff out there. I still couldn't find that real specific diagram that just says it all. That sometimes you have that the publishers create. And that was my frustration, is sometimes what they say, a picture's worth 1,000 words. Or is this a diagram or a little animation in teaching chemistry that just says it all? And so I just couldn't break away from that personally.
Oh, that's very understandable, and I really applaud a lot of the publishing companies for adding so much rich media value to the common textbook, if you will. And so as long as you're contained within your class environment and you have the fair use to use all that stuff, boy, I certainly do when I teach.
Right.
Let me add a little background in terms of this Creative Commons licensing in terms of SoftChalk, because there's two things that people should know about SoftChalk. One is they have a media search tool, and the media search tool allows you to search all kinds of digital repositories for the, including determining whether or not they have Creative Commons licensing and what that is in order to bring them into your lesson. So if you want the kind of animation Don is talking about, you can use the media search tool to go looking for it, and hopefully you will find it in one of multiple media libraries out there. The other piece is when you create content in SoftChalk, we're very involved in the open educational resource community, and so of course we use Creative Commons licensing. We have SoftChalk Cloud, which has a public area where people will share their lessons and put Creative Commons licensing in it. So we're trying to add to that backdrop of all this content that people would like to have access to without particularly having a licensing or copyright issue. To go on, there's several questions about the QR codes and how you created them and how SoftChalk helped do that. And and one of them I answered, well, SoftChalk is not creating the QR code.
Well, it is so easy, and usually if you just mention it to your students, is exactly what I did. I was just goofing around in class one day and said, what would really be cool is when I hand my test back to you, if I had a QR code sticker on it, and it would have a little video of me explaining where you went wrong on the problem. And I learned, and my student just took it and run with it. He says, that's really cool. So what he did, there's a number of QR code makers. You simply go on there. One of the things, again, worrying about copyright issues, I didn't want to put my videos out there on YouTube where anyone could see them in case I would inadvertently break a copyright law. I found out that there's this private YouTube. You can upload your videos and you get a URL, and then there's an online QR code maker, and you just bring that URL in, and it will create, it's just a picture is all it is. It's just that little thing that we call a QR code. And when your phone scans it, or your iPad or whatever you use to scan it with, it just takes you to that URL. There's other things it can do besides that. But it's a free program. There's a number of them that you can use. I've turned it over to my students to just go with it. I have a lot of students who are just making those for me, but I have done it, and it's very simple. Same thing with the QR code readers on your phone. Those are all free. I'm trying to remember which one I have on mine. But there's a student I have that the dad, his father, thinks is so cool that he can bring up my lectures on his phone. So it's got some real potential, I think. And the other thing, and Larry, you kind of brought this up, is that they always have their phones with them. So if they wanted to study while they're waiting in line for something, they could bring up a chemistry lecture. They might not want to hear everyone know that they're watching the chemistry lecture, but they could do it that almost any time when they pull it up on the phone.
Exactly, and if they've got their earbuds in, it may not be music they're listening to. They may be actually studying. Right. And people that this probably isn't the case in rural Ohio, but where you have public transportation and you got a 20-minute ride on the metro or the bus or something like that. That's exactly what a lot of students do. Blackboard shared with me this study they did at I think it was Virginia Commonwealth, but they indicated that like 45% of their students accessed all of their web content, of their web content on their phones. Wow. Now, that's a sign of young eyes and the ability to see at a level that I've never had. But I love the iPad, and I think for many people the iPad becomes the mobile device of choice, or some other tablet.
One of the things you made me think of is that there was a lady that was in my class this past fall when I first did this. I asked her to get me a picture of this, and I haven't got it. She said, I have explosions. I have all these, wild things going on in my videos. And so she said her 4-year-old saw that. And so the 4-year-old would come in, sit down at her computer, plug in the earbuds, and watch my lectures. So I thought this is really great, that this 4-year-old was just...
that kid. I want to know where that kid comes out in 10 or 15 years.
I thought that was so fantastic. I said, you've got to get me a picture of this little 4-year-old. And oh, by the way, I went to the dollar store and bought all of them earbuds, and I set them down with laptops on the first day of class so that there would be no issues with running these SoftChalk lessons on their own computers, and I had 0 issues. It worked beautifully. So,
I have one more question I think would be really interesting to get to before we leave, and let me just say that as soon as we're done here, we're going to talk a little bit more about NISOD, and I want you to stay around for the couple of minutes that Larry can talk about that. And then we're going to talk a little bit about how you get more information and all of our contact information, so stay tuned. We'll be there in a second. The last question we'll have time for is talk about the difference between the weaker student and the motivated student, and whether the flipped classroom is actually, how the weaker student responds to it. Is that better for them, worse for them? Is the motivated student better off in a flipped classroom? How does that all fit together? Can you talk about that, Don?
it is so much better for all of them, because I have, in my class, there's one student, the one I mentioned earlier that drives almost an hour. She was a nervous wreck. I mean, a lot of these older students that are coming into chemistry, they're so nervous about it. And so she has calmed down so much now and is making A's in all the tests. And she says, I just love being able to keep going over the lessons, like Larry, like you said. And I've had 2 or 3 of my older students that really love the concept. And all of them like it because they can, like you said, they can do this at their own pace, on their own time. And I don't feel that I'm wasting anyone's time. I'm addressing the issues they have. So I don't have to meet a certain length of time. It's like, what do we, I do create, have plans, but they're all doing really well. The class, I had a very small, first time you teach a blended course, our college limits it to like 15 or 20 students, something like that. I think I ended up with all A's and B's. They did extremely well in my class. So all of them, it's a win-win situation.
Okay, there's a lot of questions here that are coming up, but we do not have time to do it. There's some questions about SoftChalk, but what I want to do now is I want to take the screen back, and I want Larry to talk about NISOD. And I think you can see my screen, can you not?
Yes.
No, I don't think so.
I see the opening screen, Larry, is what I'm seeing.
I should see, you should be seeing a screen. Okay, make presenter me. Okay, there you go. Larry, you want to tell them a bit about NISOD?
Yeah, well, NISOD is a membership organization. Our mission is really to serve community, technical, and junior colleges. Now, the fact of the matter is we have universities and we have a growing interest in the what we call the P20 world. So this is all good stuff for us. We have been around for 35 years. We have a signature event here in Austin, Texas. It's the International Conference on Teaching and Leadership Excellence. It's more commonly referred to as the NISOD Conference. But this year it will be May 26th through the 29th, and yes, I do know that's Memorial Day weekend. It's one of the most commonly asked questions I get, but I can't change that this year or maybe ever. It's just the way it is. But we do have a great conference. Last year we had 1,835 attendees. We are putting together our program. I encourage anybody that's interested in NISOD or the NISOD conference to go to our website, which is simply nisod.org, and you'll find ample information about the conference itself and about NISOD. Let me say one of the things, I've been in the role of director for a mere 6 months, but my background is instructional technology. I spent a lot of time working directly with faculty, supporting faculty in teaching and learning, and I've been involved with distance education since the early 1980s. So what I bring to NISOD is actually a real passion for the use of appropriate technology in teaching and learning. And to that end, I'm just so delighted that SoftChalk and NISOD are partnering together in this webinar series. And again, Don, you just did a splendid job on this. I'm so inspired by your stories, and I know that this is the type of success that community colleges are really known for. So sharing your success is just a very, very important thing to all of us at NISOD. But I really, really appreciate your commitment to using technology. You said you taught for 30 years, and this is a strange thing, but it's a fact. A lot of the most seasoned faculty that we have are the real champions of the use of technology in teaching and learning. So I applaud you. Just in terms of NISOD, again, we are a membership organization. We are actually part of the University of Texas College of Education. We're not a 501c3, but we are part of the University of Texas and proud to be so. So I hope to see many of you at our conference in Austin, May 26th through the 29th. Great. And thank you also, Steve, for all the work you do in putting this series together, and I really look forward to working with you on the rest of these.
Right. Well, as I said, we've been at this for over 6 years, and I've gotten fairly comfortable with it finally. Anyway, just to let everybody know, this is the first in a 4 series. This session is being recorded, so it'll be out there as an archive by tomorrow, and all of you will get an email with a link to the archive probably tomorrow. So look for that. Let folks that you know say, hey, this was a fabulous session, and it was indeed done.
Thank you.
And let them know that there's an archive they can watch it. It's not too late. Upcoming ones deal with various different aspects of flipping a classroom, from public speaking course and also manufacturing education. This is a really remarkable story. It's a national program that the Kentucky Community Colleges started with all of the U.S.-based automobile industries to retool their staff for the new technologies using the flipped classroom. It's a wonderful story. It's going to be a great presentation. And of course, the last one is about, the theoretical structures, Bloom's taxonomy and Chickering and, help me here, Chickering and, Anyway, and there are 7 principles of undergraduate education. All that will fit into why this works so well. So there'll be a theoretical underpinnings for it. They all are available. Go to our website, and that's the lecture, the link is right there. And we'll be recording all of them, and we'll be talking about them. A lot of questions about how SoftChalk works and why it works and how it works, and I couldn't get to all of them. There was things as simple as the thumb drive that is being used and how that is being distributed and how the content gets put out there. Well, SoftChalk also creates executable content. They put in a thumb drive. If they get a PC, they execute a .exe. If they're on a Mac, they do the equivalent, and it just plays in their browser. So there's a lot of things you can do to make this work. And if you have more questions, you can either go to our website, register for one of our intro webinars, go through, and Don talked about it, our wonderful video tutorials, our short courses, and of course lesson tutorials. We use SoftChalk to create lessons on how to use SoftChalk. That's kind of creative. Why don't we think about that? Anyway, so sign up for our newsletter and our Facebook and the other social media. So here's the final slide, something I want to leave you all with. You'll be getting this information tomorrow in the email as well. Contact information about the work being done by Don Storr, and there his email address, and you'll get that again in the email tomorrow. And, information about us in general, you can contact Learn More, or if you want to talk to me particularly, and I'd love to hear from you, send an email to me. And if you want to know more about NISOD, let Larry Miller know about that, and he'll be glad to respond to you. We did not have a chance to answer all of your questions, but I think we got to most of them. Both Don and Larry and I will take a look at the questions that went unanswered, and we'll try to get back to you on those. In the meantime, I want to finally thank